All right, we'll give it another minute or two for people to come on in. Thanks, Kate. Oh. Aw, Kim, you're so sweet. I have to admit, I was having a total love fest with Linda Nielsen by email this week. And that felt really good because she's amazing.
She said she was learning stuff during the conference. I was like, yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
No, I know. That was one of the highlights of my day.
Yeah. So Dave and Matthias, I don't remember. Have you guys read the specs grading book yet by Linda Nielsen? Well, she was our keynote. We just finished with her. And she's been coming to the conference all day, and it's just been really neat to give back to her and have her give to us. And
yeah.
Pretty cool. It was pretty cool. Yay, CSU Fullerton. Let's hear it for Cal State. Kim, how's your EO 1110 implementation been going? So that's what I want to know whenever I hear from the CSUs. Oh, goodness. All right. Okay, so we are right at time. So we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to our first panel discussion of this kind for the conference, getting buy-in from your students. Really excited for this one. Couple of reminders, we are recording this session. We're planning to post it and the slides so you can review them later. And so therefore we're retaining the right to rebroadcast and distribute it. And if you participate, you're agreeing that your contributions become part of the recording. As we've said all day, but it bears repeating, College Bridge has been a tremendous supporter of this conference for 2 years, and they're a tremendous supporter of mastery grading in general, so thank you to them. So right now we're doing parallel sessions, and so we're going to take about 5 minutes for each of our presenters to introduce themselves. Then we're going to do an open Q&A. So make sure that if you wanted to go to 5C, refresh your website screen because you should be going to a link that says calstatela.zoom.us. We had to make a change just a few minutes ago. There is going to be a joint wrap up, or actually this link is the joint wrap up. So y'all can stay here and everyone else can come to us. We do have an optional social happy hour after that. So this session to participate, I think you guys are used to this by now. Feel free to chat and make sure to set your chat to all panelists and attendees. You do comments, suggestions, crosstalk. If you want to pose a question to the panel, please use the Q&A feature. It's much easier for us to track it. And if time allows, we might be able to allow unmuting, so you can also raise your hand. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Matthias or Dave, which of you would like to go first and introduce yourselves?
Matthias, you go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Matthias Brios. So you may hear I'm coming from France. I've been teaching in France during almost 20 years, and I arrived here at CSULA 3 years back now. And once I arrived at CSULA, I've been teaching statics, ME 2010, which is a fundamental course in mechanical engineering. And I've been exposed to the difference between the students I was used to work with in France and the students from CSULA. And so working with Dave, we have tried to find ways to improve our teaching and the involvement of students. And after creating something amazing, we discovered that it was existing for years among a community that was naming this approach the mastery grading.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Raymond. Thank you, Sharona, for the invitation to participate in the panel today. I've been part of the Cal State Los Angeles Mechanical Engineering faculty for 10 years now. Prior to that, I spent 14 years in industry working at an automotive engineering or automotive company in Michigan. and then worked in forensic engineering for 9 years. I've been teaching statics the entire time I've been at Cal State Los Angeles, in addition to some other courses. And yes, Matthias and I have been collaborating since his arrival at Cal State LA on statics, traditionally challenging course for students, not just at our institution, but at all institutions that teach statics. And it's through our collaboration that we kind of stumbled across mastery-based grading and have been exposed now, thanks to Sharona, to a whole community, and we're learning a ton from Sharona and from the community at large. And so we're happy to be here to share our experience.
Okay, Jessica.
Hello, I'm Jessica Kelly. I am at Christopher Newport University, which is a small, about 5,000 students public institution located in Virginia. I have been here for about 6 years. My experience with mastery grading is primarily with mastery-based testing in calculus courses. I'm a mathematics professor. And I was first introduced to the idea of mastery testing and mastery-based grading through a professional development program through the Mathematics Association of America called Project Next. And there's a cohort of professors there that we sort of all started our careers together and have transitioned to implementing mastery grading in our classrooms. I have an article that I published as part of the Primus special edition on mastery grading, and that's actually mastering your sales pitch, selling mastering grading to your students. So very relevant for this particular panel, and you can see the information on my slide. But what I like to challenge people when I talk about mastery grading and promoting it to your students is thinking about it in sort of 3 steps: the beginning of the semester, the middle of the semester, and then the end of the semester. And while we focus on buy-in for our students, it's only successful if we buy into it ourselves. So I'm sure that some of those ideas and things will come up as we go into the question and answer, and I'll be happy to talk more about those as we get more specific questions.
Okay, great. And Jay.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me. Yes, I'm Jason Elsinger, and I'm a mathematics professor at Florida Southern College. I was also previously at Spring Hill College in Alabama, and both are private liberal arts schools. Class sizes are fairly small. For me, not usually much bigger than 25 or 30. Currently, I teach 3 classes each semester, and in each class now I use mastery-based grading. I thought it'd be good to list some of the courses I've used mastery-based grading in. You can see quite a few gen ed classes. I initially only did it with majors classes. Those are sort of some of the at the bottom of the list. And then I decided to implement it into elementary statistics once I heard so many successful stories at the Math Fest session. So I decided to try it myself. On the next slide, I just had a few thoughts that, of course, we'll talk about. A few things that I think I do that are important to try and get that buy-in from students. So I can let you look at the list there, but I guess we'll talk about these things as we go along.
Okay, so I'm going to tee up the first question, but I am going to also start to throw it out to the people attending. If you have specific questions or things you want to hear about building buy-in, but I'm going to start it off by asking the panel, what is the first thing, and maybe Jessica, I'll start with you since you have actually split this into the 3 things. How do you start at the beginning building buy-in with students?
Sure. Yeah. So the first day of class is just so crucial for students. It's their first introduction to your course and to mastery grading. I think there's 2 important conversations to start the semester off with. And the first, I see Jay has it on his slide here, is promoting a growth mindset. I believe all of us who implement mastery grading want to see our students develop a growth mindset. So I often reference Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, and there are a couple other great resources. Carol Dweck has several articles that I'll have my students read and sort of have a class discussion on what it means to have a growth mindset. So as opposed to focusing on the techniques and the course structure itself, focusing primarily on the growth mindset takes it out of the context of a new system and into a sort of habit and development of their mental exercise. The other component to that, besides just talking about growth mindset, which will be revisited throughout the semester, is to not overwhelm the students. I think we have the temptation to tell every student every single piece and part of mastery grading and how every redo or retake or grade sheet, how all of those little details are going to work throughout the semester. And I think for that first week until the first examination or the first quizzes are coming up, it's a really great idea to not really talk about it all that much and just give them the general idea. And as specific questions and as you approach those mile markers for the first time, you talk more intensely about each of those steps. So growth mindset and don't overwhelm on the first day is my main go-to.
Okay, and then I want to ask Dave, could you share the conversation we had yesterday? Because you have a little bit different story about how you, like your first buy-in conversation with students that first semester versus what do you do now?
Sure. So the first experience we had offering the mastery-based grading and statics, and to be fully honest, we didn't really understand that that's what we were even doing. But Matthias and I were co-teaching statics. We had two separate sections, but we started off the semester with a traditional, grading scheme. I think we had maybe 2 midterm exams, a final exam, and, fairly traditional approach to the class. And per history, we had a pretty terrible first exam about week 6. The over 50% of the class failed, roughly. Not uncommon, but still alarming. And, to Matthias's credit, he just wasn't satisfied with us continuing to move ahead with doing things the old-fashioned way and the way we've been doing them. And so we basically worked together to come up with a new way of doing things to kind of blow up the syllabus, sort of say. And we literally got their buy-in. We put together what turns out to be a mastery-based system based off of certain learning outcomes that we got buy-in from the entire mechanical engineering faculty. We have kind of a hierarchical structure to it. And we put it to the students and we said, this is basically what we propose to do, but we're only going to go to it if we get your approval to do that. And they did. I think we got unanimous support for it at that point. But of course, we had a lot of failures at that point on the first exam. So there was motivation as well there. But and we often say that there was some kind of magic that was created that semester. We also used more of a flipped classroom approach with it as well. It's another piece of it. But for both of us, we continue to comment that that's the most dynamic class that we've taught. I regularly had to kick students out of the room at the end of the session. It was probably the most engaged class I've taught. I don't know if you want to add to that, Matthias.
Not really, I think, because we repeated that during 3 semesters. I think the recipe is to make them understand that we are caring about their success. And I think that's what made us successful the first time. And that's what is making us successful every semester. As long as the students know we are caring about their success and not their grades. And there is a huge difference in terms of understanding. And knowing that we are caring about their success let them understand that we are not just here to gain money, but we are here to serve them. And I think, well, for our students at least, that's what makes them being completely involved. And we are a team, indeed. That's also something really important. There is not the teacher on one side and the students on the other side. There is a team, and we are just one of the members of the team.
Okay, Jay, how about over to you?
Yeah, I think my thoughts really echo Jessica's. Initially, right, you don't want to overload the students. So years ago, I used to spend like 40 minutes going over. So previously today, I forget who it was, but they had that slide where it was different students that all had a 70 average. Like I go through that slide and those concepts and some of those things that Linda Nielsen had on what we'd like a grading system to be. And I want to kind of say, well, the one I'm going to use is try to promote those things. I used to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I don't do that anymore. Instead, I just describe that each problem they take is worth up to 3 points and just emphasize this idea that if they don't get a problem right, they can try it again later to keep a higher score. And I think just that's enough to get them a little interested. So maybe initially I let them think about grading like they usually do. And then as the first couple of weeks play out, they get to see, experience it themselves. Because I think no matter how much you talk at them at the beginning, they need to just experience it. And it may take a few weeks before you get to the first reassessment anyway. So I like to just keep it brief. And the other thing I do try to do early on is to ask the students to sign up for office hours, just as a greeting, just to get to know you kind of thing. It could even be a short meeting. But then I found it's a great opportunity to ask one-on-one, hey, I was going over this and that about the grading. Did that make sense to you? Was there anything, anything that was confusing to you? You could kind of get that confirmation one-on-one. Because I think sometimes when you talk to a class, it doesn't register with some people, but then when you say it to them one-on-one, for some reason it clicks just fine. And then if they say, yeah, I like that idea, it made sense. And I can be like, okay, great. I didn't talk about it yet, but I also let you master things twice. So you can actually double your points. And they're like, oh, cool. So then I know when I talk about it later in class, some folks have already heard the idea.
Okay, we have a question from Kyle Bessing, and anyone can jump in on this. How do you recommend building buy-in and student confidence in the system as you inevitably stumble through your first attempt at mastery grading? So thinking about the first time you did this, how would you, and maybe Jason, since you were just talking, how would you do that given that you changed from what you did before to what you do today?
Sorry, I just want to check I got the question. How did I change?
Well, no, they asked, how do you recommend building buy-in as you inevitably stumble through the first time you did it? So given what you know now, if you were going to do this for the first time, what would you?
I think for me personally, a mistake I made was that I wasn't as transparent with the students when I knew that maybe some adjustments were going to be needed in the grade bundles. Because one thing I struggle with is when you create things for the first time, what should be a C? You don't want to make it too hard. You don't want to make it too easy. So sometimes I might need to make an adjustment. And I didn't communicate very well the first time I tried the elementary statistics. And I think rightfully so, a lot of students got frustrated because they thought they weren't going to get a good grade or something. But in reality, I was like, no, I knew I was going to need to make an adjustment. So I suppose just, if you are, I'm sure doing it for the first time or something, just be transparent with the students and explain, like I forget who here just said it, but I think it was Matthias, like, we just want to communicate, leak through whatever you do, that you really just care about their success and want them to have a positive experience. So if you're doing something new, just explain why you think it's great for them and that there's going to be some bugs to work out. I think they'll understand, but just be consistently open about it. That's my advice.
Anyone else have a thought? Yeah, Matthias?
Yeah, what I would do is just to show them what's the difference between a classical grading and mastery grading approach. The idea of the mastery grading approach is that if they have some difficulties, they may stretch the time. And once you made them understand that, that's very helpful. Once you have defined what is required for a C, they may have up to the whole semester to fully validate the C grade. And understanding that they will have more time to get prepared is also, well, that's the way we succeed to make them understanding that indeed everyone can succeed at different level of skills, but everyone can succeed. And well, if I had to use this mastery approach in other classes, in other courses I'm teaching, that's what I would show. I would show the success rate between the classical approaches and the mastery approaches I had in other courses. And well, yeah, that's the way I would do.
Jessica?
So I think one of the things that really helped me in my first iteration of mastery grading, I had it all planned out, but of course it did not go the way that I anticipated. And I think someone mentioned this in the chat, but really being transparent with the students and saying, we are on this adventure together. This is why this system will benefit your education and benefit you academically. But let them take ownership of some of the kinks along the way, asking the students for feedback, and they become a participant in molding the curriculum and the objectives and the grading scheme for future students. And I really felt being honest with the students and giving students power to mold future courses. Some of their ideas I did not take, of course, but that they have this idea that they're creating a class that's going to be better for their future classmates. They really took a significant responsibility with that and really did want to put in the effort. And in terms of, I think we're always worried about course evaluations, but I think that instead of seeing some of the failures of mastery grading that semester, they did not comment on the failures, but they rather talked about how they were excited to see the improvements over subsequent semesters.
Okay, anyone else? All right, I think I'm going to kick this next one. Jessica, I'm going to have you start this next one off from Ed Loeb. It says, I will be teaching the second semester of our calculus sequence in the spring. I plan on using standards-based grading in my class, but the previous course will be using the traditional grading method. Have any of you had a similar experiences of teaching a middle course in a sequence that has a radical shift in grading, and how would you address the major differences in the grading schemes and help them see the value in the standards-based grading method?
So maybe I'm not the best person to kick this off.
Okay.
I've never done a transition like that. I have gone the opposite way. I taught Calc 1 mastery, and then I went and taught Calc 2. I just didn't have the time to put together mastery grading for the next semester. And the looks on my students' faces when I said, we're not doing mastery grading this semester, it was like my previous students, their hearts had just dropped that they were not going to get to have that experience. And so especially if you get to have some of the same students along the sequence, I think that they'll adapt and be just fine.
Anyone else have an experience of being in the middle of a sequence? Okay, well, I've actually done this exact thing. I usually teach Calc 2. It's usually standards based. I'm the only one in the department in the Calc sequence. And it works just fine. I mean, what I'm hoping that they take away from it is that they learn how to teach themselves things, how to grow. And so even in a traditional grading system, they can bring that growth mindset, but it works. It does. Okay, we have another question here. Anyone can start us off from an anonymous attendee. Any suggestions on how to cover the first day information in a fully asynchronous course? So how are you going to build buy-in if you've got a fully asynchronous? Anyone faced with that?
I have not done it fully asynchronous, but I saw in the chat someone was talking about creating some short like YouTube videos that students could go and watch, which I think is a really great idea. I think you would need to do that specifically for your course, that there's not going to be generic videos out there that would fit with your system necessarily. One of the things that I think is helpful, maybe not in the buy-in of the system, but for like the first assignment, one of the things that I found that students were really struggling with is I had named all of the objectives in our calculus sequence. I knew what they meant, but they did not necessarily correspond to the section names, and the students were having difficulty taking something like related rates or implicit differentiation and translating that into what they were actually learning in class. And so a nice collaborative activity that you could do on Perusal or your course management system is I had students join in groups, and for each objective on that first assignment, they had to write down what they thought the objective meant and then find homework problems or examples from class that they would post in that section that they thought would be appropriate for that section. And then I kind of gave some comments like, yeah, this fits in this section, but remember, you don't have a calculator, so we'd have to rework this problem in this way. And I think that that really helped, and that gets the conversations going.
Anyone else want to share with that one?
We had, for statics, we had run a kind of a semi-asynchronous, it wasn't fully asynchronous, but we had built out in Canvas, a modular-based class that required students to go through and do certain things within pages. And then we had quizzes set up for understanding. Do they understand what mastery-based is? And I don't know if I'd call it so much buy-in as much as us really trying to kind of just educate them within the first, we called it course orientation module that they had to complete. And then once they were able to kind of pass out of that module, if you will, with the quiz and viewing of certain videos and other pages, then we allowed them to then proceed into the first actual course module. And then Matthias has done some further development within Canvas since then, but that's what we did.
Matthias?
Well, I'm not sure a fully asynchronous, what we did in a fully asynchronous way, I'm not sure it was a success. So I don't know if I need to detail. I think the main difficulty we had with the fully asynchronous thing was the buy-in. And we are at the same question. We felt to make them understanding that we were caring about that result, and we felt to have them involved during the 15 weeks. They were very involved at the very beginning, but with time, despite our emails, despite our communication, a lot of them dropped. So I'm not sure I'm the best one to give advice about what has to be done. And after one fully asynchronous semester, I went to a semi-asynchronous because that was the way I found that way a way to have interaction and to make them understanding that I was involved, I was working with them. And I think that's really important to make them understanding how much we care and how much we are dedicating time for that and for them.
Okay. We have a question here, Jay. Will you share your grade bundles? Are you
On it
going to do
now.
that?
Yeah.
Huh?
I'm on it now. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to answer that in typing. Okay. So we have this one's interesting for anyone. An anonymous attendee asked, I'm dealing with a situation right now. A student misunderstood and thought that a revision assignment was the same as a reassessment. As a result, she did not come to the final because I told students that if they knew from looking at Canvas that they have mastered enough outcomes, they don't need to take the final. I was tired. I did not chase after everyone to find out if they were planning to take the final. Now she believes that she should have an A instead of a B because she successfully completed a revision assignment, though she never followed up to do a reassessment. What do I do? Any suggestions on that one? If no one takes it, I will. So my suggestion on this one is that we are in a land of grace and misunderstandings. And if there is a way to let her take something so that she can show the mastery, I would probably try to do that and then let her earn the grade. That would be, yeah. So basically, even though it's, because you can always do an after the semester grade change, in this day and age, that's what I would do, because I myself have a freshman son, and communication in this medium is so hard that I'm kind of trying to bend over backwards. So that's what I would do. I don't know that everyone else would do it, but that's what I would do. Okay, we have another question from Mara. Do you have any recommendations in particular for how to introduce mastery grading and a non-lecture based course such as flipped simultaneously? I assume both of these might be new for my students. Anyone want to start tackling that one?
I don't have any experience, but my first thought is that it's got to be a lot. It's a whole like two brand new things. I'm not sure.
I'm kind of thinking, Jay, with what you said, and Jessica, with what you said about we usually explain too much. Maybe that is what's hitting my mind, is just don't. Just tell them how the course is going to run. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with that. And I would say what they need to know initially is day to day how the course is going to run and what assignments they will be responsible for. And then as the mastery assignments become available and they're receiving feedback in perhaps a way that's unusual, not a grade for the entire assignment, but grades on specific objectives, then it's at that time that you can start to talk about mastery grading, why you're doing it, and how it's going to fit into the flipped classroom model. I don't know this person's experience, but I would be wary of trying mastery grading and a flipped classroom if you haven't done either of those things all in the same semester, because it can become pretty overwhelming. So maybe try them singularly in 2 different courses. You get your spiel down for both, and then you can kind of combine those together for your ultimate class that you would like to teach.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I think just make it clear, relatively consistent, what their expectation should be for the next little bit. What should they expect? I think that was maybe another mistake I made early on, is I didn't do that very well. So students didn't really know what to expect. So I think it might just feel like this different, confusing thing when really it's not that confusing.
I'm going to take this next one to Dave and Matthias. I keep getting stuck mentally in how to keep records. It sounds very complicated to keep track of each objective for each student. In any given math class or class, there can be a lot of objectives. How are you guys tracking and communicating your student progress?
So what we did is that we have decomposed our learning outcomes in 9 steps. And 3 steps are corresponding to a C grade. 3 steps are corresponding to a B grade, as long as the first 6 are validated, and the 9 steps must be validated for an A. So that makes the things quite easy to track, and that makes the thing quite easy for the student to understand. So the first 3 steps are named C1, C2, and C3. And each exam are named C1, C2, and C3. And we are grading them, and this grading is corresponding to the learning outcomes on one hand and to the grade on the other hand. So that's the way we are facilitating the things.
Yeah, we're trying to make that as simple as we can, while also having enough resolution and covering enough of the learning outcomes without going too crazy. We also, just in terms of actual practicality of how we track it, We use Canvas. We're Canvas-based campus, and so we use the Mastery-Based Learning gradebook in Canvas to track those. You know, it basically uses a color coding, and also we do use a point-based points within that, but it's primarily, you know, a red, yellow, green, and so showing students basically how to be able to view their progress based on the learning outcomes is really the biggest challenge, which is not too difficult. But yeah, I think the main thing for us is we just we haven't proliferated the learning outcomes to a point where it has become difficult at all to track where students are at. It's actually, I found it to be much easier than the way that we were doing it with well, I don't know, much easier, but it's easier, I think, than the traditional grading in terms of keeping track of all the points and all of that.
Anyone else? Grade tracking and communicating student progress?
Yeah, I agree that. Oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Jessica.
I was going to say, I have found that I think it's really important. I make my students track their own grades. I'm the official record keeper, but I require them to keep their grades as they go. And I think that actually produces a lot of buy-in because they're responsible for checking the boxes. I have a sheet that they fill out that helps them figure out their grade. But then they are able to see, oh, if I master 2 more objectives, I know how to calculate my grade and I can figure out how much that's going to improve my final average at the end of the day. And I think that keeping their grades, it's an extra step for them, but it also produces buy-in for the students because they can see very tangibly how much one more check mark is going to impact their grade.
And Jay?
Yeah, I was just going to say that certainly don't want to do a lot of work with keeping track. I used to one semester, and it's not fun because you make mistakes, and then the students have to come back and so what I do now is I have an Excel file that, yeah, for every quiz, I just put the marks in. And then I have a button macro that I wrote that updates the highest scores. On that question I answered, I put a Google Drive folder. In that file is some Excel files that's in there, if you want to see how that looks.
I also
yeah,
keep a
use
separate
technology.
Excel file. Yeah, sorry, Jay. But I also keep track in a separate Excel file just as a backup. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Are there certain types of students that are hard to convince that mastery grading is a good idea? Are they typically students who are usually successful in a traditional class?
I think that this is something I struggle with sometimes. There's usually like 1 or 2 students. They tend to be weaker students, but I think what the issue is sometimes a student tries to fit their traditional model of grading onto what I'm doing, which doesn't fit. So I think it just doesn't compete with them. And then time goes by, they don't really get it, which is why I like to intervene early on with the one-on-one conversation. But I think it does happen a little bit. And my suggestion is to just try and have one-on-one conversations, because those are the students that in class, it doesn't seem to compute, but then one-on-one, that's what I've noticed, at least it seems to click better.
Okay, we have another question from Ed. What is the biggest challenge you've had with student buy-in when you started or still have? Who wants to take that one? Biggest challenge?
I'll take a crack at this. I think one thing that I've noticed with mastery, well, I'll tell you, first of all, my first expectation of the first challenge is because we went away from, offering traditional exams with partial credit. It took a while for the students to get over that. And, we set a mastery level and it was, you achieved that or you didn't. And I thought the biggest challenge would be students kind of coming in and arguing that, well, this mistake I made isn't that big a deal and I should just get credit for it. But actually, that just doesn't happen. It's a rare occasion that happened. I think the challenge that I see is that that students are actually working more and more time on task to reach the mastery level that normally maybe they would have just accepted a lower grade on an exam and just moved on to other stuff. Whereas now we're continuing to work at stuff until they reach that level of mastery. And so I think sometimes, the students may get a little frustrated when they're not able to just test on something and then just move on to something else. We make them just stick to it until they reach that mastery. And so sometimes that can be frustrating for some students. But then when they get it, there's an equal level of exhilaration, I think, on their part that they got it. But that's my 2 cents.
Anyone else?
I think a challenge for me is sometimes I hear students kind of say that at any given point in the semester, they have trouble knowing where they stand in the course or how their progress is. Because for a while they have not a D yet and then a D for a while. So that I can either have a conversation with them, I can quickly look at my file and say, yeah, you're doing well, with this progress and that. But maybe having a way for students to see that progress. Something I did to try to address this is created another Excel file for the students. I think Jessica had mentioned this, like having the students keeping track. And in that Excel file, I created some progress bars, an idea I got from last year's conference. I think it's really neat. So as they fill in the numbers, hopefully they see the progress bar going towards the C or the D or something. And together with conversations in class where you can talk about what to expect and how it works, and that we haven't learned much yet, so that's why you don't have a C yet, kind of thing. I think all that works together. But anyway, it's a challenge I still have, I guess.
Theme of the conference. We're all still progressing on this whole mastery grading thing. Okay, we have 2 questions from Katie Ann Skogsberg. Sorry for pronunciation. The first question is, the students I have that show the most anxiety about a new grading system are the, quote, pre-med students who feel that they need to get an A to be competitive for medical school. How do you reassure them? So we'll start with that one. I'm going to guess Matthias and Dave, you guys don't deal with a lot of pre-med. So Jay or Jessica, do you guys have those?
I think in general, I don't have to do with pre-med at all, but students that are, like they're motivated to get that A, basically. They have something, they'll do it. I mean, if these are students that'll do what it takes they'll do it. I mean, because we'll give them the opportunities to reassess. And as long as they put the effort in to fix their mistakes and willing to try again, they'll make the A. I mean, they'll do well in the course. I don't think I would say that as like a guarantee, but I would say very confident as long as you're willing to put the effort in, especially if we're talking about a lower level course. So I'm not worried about those students at all.
Yeah,
the ones
I'd
that don't
agree
come to
with-
class.
I totally agree with Jay about that the pre-med are really high achieving students. I think it actually helps them because they know that they have these extra opportunities to revise and reassess, and they are willing to put in the effort and time to continue to get that A. And it's almost, it eases their anxiety because they know that they have those extra opportunities. They're not putting all of the pressure is not on one exam for them. So they know that they can achieve the concepts with a little bit more time, a little bit more effort. And I think that those most anxiety students, they are the ones who really thrive in this environment. It's the people who are at the low CD level that can kind of drop off during the semester that you can lose rather than help with the system.
I hope that though the system helps with that anxiety. Just want to throw that out there.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it helps with the anxiety.
Yeah.
It channels it in a different way.
I also I would say I tell my students what my historical situation is. I say, look, this is not an easy A class, but I give a lot of A's. So you're going to work probably harder than you've ever worked, but you're more likely to get an A in my class than in most, because I often will have, 80% of my class is getting A's, but they're working really hard to get them. So I find that helps students. So
I think, Matthias, our percentage overall of A's has really not changed significantly since we've gone to mastering. It really, where we're seeing the largest effect is down more at the C level, and raising those students who otherwise would have not passed the class. They're able to to get up to a point where they're able to pass the class, not quite to the A or even B range, but our A's and even the upper level B's have been fairly consistent.
Okay, we have another question. Have any of you had students bring up concerns about implicit bias of the instructor towards any groups of students? I teach a class where most of the students are not the same gender and/or race as me. How can I build a system that shows clear thought has been put into the system to avoid these pitfalls? Anyone want to touch on that?
I would say that I've had kind of the opposite experience in that I think that the students feel the system is less biased than a traditional grading system. I know there's a lot of different ways that mastery grading can be implemented. The way I grade, I've moved away from a mastered, middle stage, and unmastered grading scheme to just a bimodal system, whether either you mastered it or you didn't. And so that removes the idea that partial credit is going to be given. And in order to master it, it has to be perfect. So there's really no bias there in that if it's not perfect, you haven't achieved that M or check mark in that particular category. Oftentimes without the students knowing, if they miss a plus sign or move a negative accidentally, I make a mark in my grade book if I need to do a little readjustment at the end of the semester, because that's the reason why they didn't ultimately master that objective. But they don't have any idea that I'm doing that along the way.
I will say that I echo that what Jessica said. We have a very similar, identical approach. I think we've tried to take out as much bias, to where, as Matthias said, we're here to help them. We want to make it very clear what it takes to master a learning outcome and remove the professor as a potential source of variation in the feedback and the grade or that they're getting in a course. I've gotten an email from a student when I swapped out with another professor, oh, you've doomed us all, So this, I think, the way that we've taken an approach where it's basically right or wrong, and we do allow, as Jessica mentioned, and we make explicit exceptions for obvious, calculator input error, something silly like that. We make those exceptions, but we make them very clear. And like I said, we have very, very little in terms of feedback that suggests that oh, well, you gave him more points than you gave me for that, or that doesn't exist anymore. So I think it lends itself to being less biased that way.
Just to tag on what you guys said, I am moving towards that sort of 2 level. I have 1 level in between, which is I have a revision level, and that's where I want them to correct those sign mistakes and those other calculational errors. I want them to have to actually take that extra step of going ahead and revising it to get it right. So that revision step is still not mastery. So it's mastery, not mastery, but the revision allows them to not have to do an entirely new problem, because, and especially in linear algebra, where it's just, there is so many opportunities in a row reduction, or I get a lot of transcription mistakes where they copy a matrix and it was a 1, it becomes a -1 or something like that. So I like forcing them to go back and I'll tell them, hey, you transcribed it wrong, go fix it. And it's a lot of work because it's not such a simple thing, because it affected so many pieces, but it's not conceptual. So especially in linear algebra, I do that revision step, and that's a big part of it.
I do that as well. I have I think exactly so as you said, to reduce frustration. I also think it's one of the only ways the A+ students can improve. Because if you just say, I understand some people might just say, oh, close enough, it's clear you understood it, so it's easier just to say close enough. But I think it's worth it to have them address the issue, just to give them a kind of a vague feedback on what they need to do to fix it. But I think that's a great way for the good students to even get better, just to make them correct it.
Okay, we have a question. Do you have any additional suggestions for student buy-in for a class where many students don't really want to be there, but are only there to fulfill a requirement?
Yeah, I saw that question. I think everything we've been saying, I'm thinking about that elementary statistics audience, which is that exactly.
I also think for my interest stats, the grading system supports the idea that the class could have an alternative focus. So our class is focused on creating a critical consumer of statistics. So even though we teach a lot of the same things in our traditional intro stats, we're doing hypothesis testing and stuff, we're able to really focus it and assess it. Are you getting what you need to get to use this in your real life? And so you could write some standards or specifications that even though the math or the chemistry and the engineering might be the same, the flavor of the application can be different. And that could be a way to get some buy-in.
I think also one of the things that's important when you're structuring your course is to make sure that there's some low-hanging fruit in terms of your grade structure, that there should be objectives or standards that students can master. All students should be able to master with prerequisite knowledge on the first or maybe second attempt there, to give them a little bit of motivation and encouragement. I also think an important conversation that we need to have with students, and especially the middle students, maybe the ones who are just trying to get through this gen ed course, is that students see their academics as they have to do all or kind of nothing. But the way it's laid out in objectives, for example, in a calculus class, topics like optimization, related rates, word problems, only the good students are going to get those. So let's reframe our students' thinking and have them focus on objectives that are actually obtainable and say, I need to get a C in this class. I am not a person who is going to be able to understand optimization. So I'm not going to waste my time studying something that seems unachievable. I'm going to focus on these middle topics that I can get, I can understand, I can be confident in. And they focus their work there, and then they can be super successful. And if they're successful there, then they have another opportunity to be successful at the harder topics. And I think having individual conversations with students to help them focus their studying to those smaller goals is a really, really important aspect of our mastery grading schemes.
Okay, to follow up on that, since you mentioned gen ed, we have a question. What level of mastery do you look for when teaching a gen ed course for non-majors in your field? Anyone want to tackle that?
I would say I still grade it mastered or not, but again, have more of the low-hanging fruit or some of those interpretation type questions that students who the mathematics is difficult, that they have other ways that they can show proficiency and understanding of the problems. So sometimes that might include me doing a problem and writing it out, and they have to find a mistake. They know that there's one mistake there. That's often easier than them trying to produce the computation themselves.
Jay, you've had some gen eds.
Yeah, I suppose a shift more of I would like to see writing about the concepts versus, calculations are of course going to be there, but the crux is like explaining like what you did. And sometimes I'll have students make a revision about some of the word choices that they used to make their explanations a little more clearer too as part of those revisions. See, when it's clear, they have the concept, of course.
Okay, we have a question. How do you factor homework and assignments into their grade? I had issues convincing my students to do their homework, even though I couldn't grade it. Will mastery grading help their motivation to do homework?
Matthias is all over this one. We've been dealing with the same question and challenge, actually.
Yeah, so I think we tried everything. The first thing we tried was to say, okay, there is no more homework, only the exam are taken into account, and consequently there is nothing nothing more requested. I think it's a bad idea because they were just waiting for the midterms. So then we tried a second option, which was to say, you have homework assignments, but we won't grade them because it won't be taken into account. And as a consequence, it was exactly the same as the previous case. They were not working on the homeworks. So the third attempt was last semester. Homework were requested, otherwise they won't get the grades, but they had the whole semester to do them. And the week of the final, so my class was 62 students, and I had 245 homeworks to correct plus the final. So I think that's the worst idea. So now what I'm doing, well, what I will be doing next semester is to say homework is a requirement to get a grade, but you will have a limited time to complete that. And I'll tell you in 6 months if it works or not.
I'd like to mention something if I can, Sharona.
Yes.
I think homework, I think, has to be part of it somehow. And I've heard of different people doing different things. Sharona has a way of incorporating it. And one thing that I've been considering is I think you have to consider the role that the homework plays in your specific course. In statics, of course, it's math-based, but it's very much a repetition. You know, we teach statics, but we're actually teaching a process of thinking and problem solving, much like I guess a lot of people are with some of their math courses. But the homework is actually the most critical aspect of the course, not just going and doing it once, but really struggling through it, because that's where students really start to recognize repetitions and processes that they then build a mental structure for how they're going to attack the problem on an exam. I spend a lot of time talking to students about the value and what we're really doing with homework. So I feel it definitely has to be part of the structure of the grading. What I did this past semester, slightly different from Matthias, was I used Pearson's product, their Mastering Engineering Learning Management System online. And I structured all the homework according to the learning outcomes. And I was able to, type in my own custom learning outcomes that matched the course and then group them all together. So I had the students do the homework, and even though the homework wasn't necessarily any point system towards their final grade, in order to qualify to obtain that grade, they had to get a 70% or better on the learning outcome and mastering homework. And in the mastering system, what I liked about it, and there's downsides to it, but as Matthias said, at Cal State LA, we don't have graders or anything. We're on our own when it comes to grading, providing feedback. And they have to get timely feedback for it to be valuable to them. If you just sit on homework all semester, it's like not even assigning homework, in my opinion, because they need the feedback. So the mastering system gives them that feedback, and I allow unlimited attempts at it. The only reason they don't get points on it is if they give up. And I can see all the statistics, I can see all of what's going on. So that's how I know most of my students weren't doing it until the night before the exam. That's how I know that on week 13, only about 20% of my class last semester had completed the first 5 weeks of homework. So it gave me a lot more insight into what's going on with the students. But that's how I did it. I made it as a prerequisite to be eligible to receive credit for a learning outcome. I think we're going to change it up again next semester. We're talking about doing it a little more built in as a learning outcome somehow. But I kind of liked that way of doing it. And I saw, I did see I backed off initially because the students were real nervous when I said they had to do the homework to be eligible to get that learning outcome. So I backed off a little bit of it. And when I did, students stopped doing it. And so when I reinstituted that policy, I saw everything start to go up, and then I saw performance on the exam start to go up. So.
All right, we are at time. So I want to thank our panel so very much for participating and for joining us on this session. If we didn't get to your question, please go ahead and throw it in the help desk. And up next, people are starting to join us. We do have a wrap-up session. So give me a moment to do a little bit of mechanics on the session. I'm gonna kick you guys out of the panel into the main session, and thank you very much, everybody. This is great.